Imam Slim, we'll just give it a few more minutes for people to get logged in. All the panelists are here now. And then once we'll give maybe just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started, inshallah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Good evening. My name is Salim Khalid. I'm happy to be with you this evening. I am your MC for tonight's program. And let us get right into the substance of our program with a brief introduction of our guest. First, I'd like to introduce Brother Ibrahim Abdullah, who is from Cleveland, Ohio. He is an advocate for political prisoners and a member of the Imam Jamil Action Network, in addition to being a father, a grandfather, and a military veteran. Dawood Walid is currently the executive director. He is our second guest. He's not a guest really to the community, you know him, but let me say this about Imam Dawood. He is currently the executive director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE Michigan. Imam Dawood is also a veteran, having served in the United States Navy. Now, our agenda for this evening, we're going to touch on several things. I'd like to begin by asking Brother Ibrahim to give us a brief intro to Imam Jamil for those brothers and sisters who don't have a working familiarity with the life of Imam Jamil. Brother Ibrahim?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah. First, I'd like to say, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me on here as a representative of IJAN. Alhamdulillah, just in brief, a brief introduction to Imam Jamil Alameen. For those who don't know, they may be more familiar with the name H. Rod Brown, but Imam Jamil Alameen was born Hubert Gerard Brown. He was the youngest of 3 children and born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1943, October 4th, 1943. So he just had a birthday recently. Imam Jamil attended Southern University from 1960 to 1964. During the summers of 62 to 63, he worked with Nonviolent Action Group, or also known as NAG in Washington, D.C., an affiliate of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. He left Southern in 1964 to work with NAG and became the chairperson of the organization. Most of the summer of 64, he worked with the Mississippi Summer Project and also with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Anyone who's familiar with Fannie Lou Hamer should be familiar with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And in fact, in 1964, he attended the Atlantic City Democratic Convention as part of the MFDP, which is the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And the delegation was basically headed by Fannie Lou Hamer, and who was, she was there to demand representation for the state's disenfranchised Black residents. Okay. Sorry about that. I just got the notification to start the video. And also in 1965, Imam Jamil, well, at that time he was known as H. Rod Brown. He was a worker for an anti-poverty organization in Washington, D.C. And to backtrack a little bit, he left Southern because his brother Ed, Ed Brown, who was also a Muslim, may Allah have mercy on him, he was going to Howard. And so Imam Jamil went to visit him, and this is how he kind of got introduced to the movement in Washington, D.C. in terms of the nonviolent action group, and as well as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And also SNCC, for those who don't know about SNCC, in reference to its origins, SNCC was basically formulated at the by under the direction of Ella Baker. And these are some very important figures to understand who Imam Jamil is and where his development came from. So under Ella Baker, who was the director of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, she basically urged the younger people to develop and continue their organization without being a youth wing of the SCLC. So she gave them that advice in terms of being young and not being I guess handcuffed, so to speak, by the restraints that the SCLC had on it. So they formulated SNCC in 1960, and Imam Jamil he ended up being the 5th chair of SNCC. So John Lewis was the 3rd, Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael was the 4th, and then Imam Jamil or H. Rod Brown was the 5th chair of SNCC. I think those things are important to know just to understand the political development of H. Rod Brown and now Imam Jamil Al-Amin. But so like I said, he attended the Atlantic City Conference for the Democratic Convention, as a member or as a delegate, as part of the delegation for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And he ended up becoming the chair of SNCC. I think he became the chair of SNCC in 1967. 1967. But before that, in 66 and 67, he was appointed the director of the Greene County Project in Alabama for SNCC. So at that time that Stokely Carmichael was still the chair of SNCC, but later on that year, Imam Jamil would replace Stokely Carmichael as the next chair in May of 1967, in fact. By July 24th of that same year, there was a major incident in Cambridge, Maryland, where Imam Jamil, formerly known as H. Rod Brown at that time, went to speak at a rally in Cambridge, Maryland. And basically they were ambushed by some local police officers. Imam Jamil was wounded. So he left Maryland, but going back to Washington, D.C., he was followed by local police officers. They saw him cross from Maryland into Washington, D.C., and they automatically, sent a federal fugitive warrant because he crossed state line. They said it was something in relation to inciting a riot, is what the warrant was for. So he crossed state lines, and this is important to know because then you can see the beginning of the harassment in the COINTELPRO operation specifically targeting him. And even J. Edgar Hoover had mentioned him, Max Stanford, Elijah Muhammad, and Stokely Carmichael by name as being targets of COINTELPRO. So there was no secret. This is not like just some conspiracy theory that we're making up saying, yeah, he's targeted by the police or he's targeted by government agencies. This is something that we can prove, that's been proven over years. And this is why even up until this day, while we understand that he's been targeted and that he's innocent of the crimes that he's being accused of.
Thank you, Brother Ibrahim. And for those of you that would, and it's really, you have a challenge, Brother Ibrahim, trying to share with the brothers and sisters on the life of Imam Jamil, right? Because he's had, even up until now, such a full and extraordinary life. But for those of you that would like, you can go out, I think, on the internet and still see and hear a little bit of Imam Jamil when he was still under the name of H. Rap Brown, involved with SNCC and those organizations. Imam Daoud, if you could do us the justice of talking about the history of targeting. Brother Ibrahim mentioned COINTELPRO. If you could talk about, the history of America targeting people like Imam Jamil and Max Stanford, Elijah Muhammad, if you would just share with us and kind of bring people quickly up to speed. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran da'iman abada. Well, first of all, let me say, may Allah reward you, Brother Ibrahim, and you gave a lot of information in a very short period of time. And perhaps some of you who are watching are unfamiliar with some of these names like Ella Baker, like Fannie Lou Hamer, like Stokely Carmichael, AKA Kwame Ture. And I would suggest that for those names that you are unfamiliar with, that perhaps, well, maybe even if you want to have a notebook with you or take some notes as we're going forward, but to take a look back at this video again and share it, because really, a lot of the names that were mentioned are really stalwarts as far as the movement for freedom, justice, and equality and civil rights in the United States of America, in which many of us who were not living or not involved in that movement are beneficiaries of the sacrifices of the jail time that people served, including women, the beatings that they took, such as Fannie Lou Hamer being beaten in jail, and even targeted assassinations. So it's very important that we understand who these giants are. And so there are a lot of names that were mentioned. So alhamdulillah, Brother Ibrahim made things kind of easy for me, and he kind of set the table for a few things. But he mentioned something that is very important in relationship to the targeting of Imam Jamil al-Amin, Hafidhahullah, and others during that time period. And I would suggest to you that there's been some rebranding, but basically what took place back in those days never fully stopped in America. So Brother Ibrahim mentioned something called COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is short for the Counterintelligence Program. And it was something that was started in the year 1956 by the founder of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, J. Edgar Hoover, and it lasted from 1956 to 1971, at least overtly as a program. And this program was designed to surveil, infiltrate, disrupt, and discredit civil rights leaders, certain religious leaders that the status quo, which Hoover represented, thought that they had certain religious or socio-political ideas that they deemed disruptive. And much of this was based in racism and anti-Blackness. So this was a well-funded, multi-million-dollar endeavor every year to intentionally surveil, infiltrate, and disrupt leaders that were involved in the civil rights movement and include discredit. Now, in regards to H. Rap Brown, or our Imam, Jamil al-Amin, Hafidhahullah, there was something that was, and this has been unearthed through Freedom of Information Act litigation, and also certain things being declassified once COINTELPRO was somewhat disbanded. But the FBI put out a memo, for instance, in 1967, calling for the quote unquote neutralization of Imam Jamil or H. Brown, that he needed to be neutralized. And during the time of the FBI as well as the CIA, this term neutralize means to take out. It means either to take out as far as trying to totally discredit and marginalize that the person won't have a voice in the community. Neutralization could mean putting some fake charges on someone and getting them arrested and thrown in prison. Or neutralization, being neutralized, could even mean law enforcement assassinating the person. So for instance, an African-American leader in 1969 by the name of Fred Hampton, who was a leader of the Black Panther Party in the city of Chicago, was targeted for neutralization. And there was a plot that was set up in which he was drugged by an informant. And the Chicago police, working with the FBI, stormed his house and assassinated Fred Hampton, right? So the FBI and the COINTELPRO, to show you how serious it was, that it was literally not only putting false charges on people or trying to get leaders to commit suicide, as the FBI tried to get Dr. King to commit suicide, but there even were Black leaders who were assassinated via COINTELPRO. And it's also carried overseas with similar types of activities by the CIA, stirring up coups d'etats and assassinations, such as the federal government targeted Patrice Lumumba, who was we could say the founding father of the Congo after it getting its independence from Belgium in the 1960s, how the American government set up a plot and had him assassinated, as well as other leaders that our government had assassinated. As I mentioned, 1971 was the year supposedly that COINTELPRO ended, but we know that in 1993, after the bombing of the first World Trade Center, Imam Jamil was picked up by the FBI and was questioned. Obviously, there was no evidence he had anything to do with it, but he was held and he was harassed without a single shred of evidence, linking him to the attack in which they were trying to pressure him and trying to get other people actually and try to pressure them to try to implicate Imam Jamil in something he had absolutely nothing to do with. 2 years later, in August of 1995, the FBI, along with, at that time, was called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We know it now just simply as ATF, arrested Imam Jamil on a shooting case that took place a month prior. He was arrested and being charged. He was later released from jail after the victim of the shooting said that Imam Jamil was not the shooter, but the FBI ATF tried to pressure the victim to say it was Imam Jamil who was the one that did it. And again, all this is public record. Literally how the federal government had Imam Jamil and other Black leaders, and some of them Muslims, targeted and never stopped trying to implicate them in crimes going back from the civil rights era of the 1960s, coming all the way up into the 2000s, right? So I'm saying, and we could go much further, but it is to say that we have political prisoners in American jails and prisons right now who have been targeted, who've been framed by the federal government and have been languishing in prison for decades, who were first added as targets under COINTELPRO by the FBI, never got off the database, and the government has worked steadily to smear these people and to have them falsely incarcerated, in which we believe Imam Jamil is in false incarceration right now. May Allah free him. And I know Brother Ibrahim will get into more of some of those specifics, but we have to be, I'll try to connect the dots a little later. because we sometimes as Muslims, especially those of us who come from immigrant backgrounds, may try to exceptionalize America or think that America and how the FBI works, that we think that somehow it's not like the mukhabarat in the Arab world, or how intelligence agencies may work in certain areas, but in certain countries. But that's actually far from the case as far as FBI infiltration into communities, including the Muslim community, intentional disruption, agent provocateurs, discrediting people, and then I will get later on to what we believe to have been a hit that was instituted. It was a murder that took place here in 2009, in which our Imam Luqman Abdullah, rahmatullahi alayhi, was targeted by the FBI and killed in Dearborn in October of 2009. And with that, I will close for now and let Brother Ibrahim continue.
Alhamdulillah. Thanks, brother, for that. Alhamdulillah, that was very, very informative. To go back a little bit on, at least on Imam Jamil Al-Amin's current situation, and how this particular episode evolved. Basically, in May of 1999, Imam Jamil was pulled over in Cobb County, Georgia, which, if anybody knows the Atlanta area, then basically Cobb County is Atlanta is basically comprised of kind of like different counties, or the Atlanta metropolitan area. But Cobb County is one of those counties surrounding Atlanta. And so he was pulled over. And as the officer was accused basically of driving a stolen vehicle, which he had a bill of sale. There was no evidence of the vehicle being stolen. And we have to just even connecting it to what Imam Dawood was just saying, is that we have to understand that this is a method of targeting people. So if you've been trying for years to establish any type of case against a person, and you can't find anything, then you begin to, obviously you're manufacturing things in order to try to achieve your goal. So this is just one of those methods. So Imam Jamil was pulled over, accused of driving a stolen vehicle. And as the officers were checking through his wallet, they see a badge. So the badge in his wallet, they take that and automatically assume that he's impersonating an officer. So there's no due diligence done in terms of finding out, okay, what is this badge? Is it legit? Where did he get this from, or anything like that? So he gets charged with, arrested on the terms of impersonating an officer and driving a stolen vehicle, with which both of those things were found to be untrue. The vehicle had a bill of sale, which was, shows that it was legitimately bought by him. And also the badge was given to him by the mayor of Whitehall as an auxiliary deputy for the town of Whitehall. So that was cleared up. And mind you, Whitehall is very important as well in terms of what Imam Dawood said in terms of connecting dots. When we go back a little bit into the struggle in the 60s, Whitehall was a place that was fertile, in that struggle. And Imam Jamil was one of the people that helped to make it so. Imam Jamil worked in Greene County, Alabama in the 60s. And he also worked in Whitehall, which is Lowndes County, Alabama in the 60s. And he organized Black people to vote. And they used the means of organization to get Black people to vote as a tool of organizing. So Imam Jamil was involved in this to the level to where people in Fulton County, Georgia, and they just basically have elected a new DA in Fulton County, Georgia, by the name of Fannie Willis, who will take over in January. Because of the work that people like Imam Jamil Al-Amin have done, known as H.R. Brown at the time, he allowed or basically laid a path for someone like Fannie Willis to become a DA, especially in the South. You know, and even the DA that's going out now, the one who wanted to get the death penalty against Imam Jamil Al-Amin. You know, these people basically have a debt of gratitude to Imam Jamil for the work that he's done. And if they understand it, especially with Fannie Willis coming into office in January, not only can she make history because she has the power through the Conviction Integrity Union of Fulton County, Georgia, to basically recall the case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin. And even Andrew Young, you know, who was the former U.S. ambassador and former mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, he himself said that Imam Jamil Al-Amin's case needs to be looked at. So Andrew Young is looking at this and saying, you know, this is something very egregious about this case. The evidence isn't there. Everything points to Imam Jamil's innocence, but he can't be heard because of the state of Georgia is housing him in a federal penitentiary, even though he's charged with a state crime, which is a different, very unique precedent that you don't see normally. So going back to the night of the traffic stop. So Imam Jamil was charged with impersonating an officer and driving a stolen vehicle, which both were proven false. Now, on the day of his court date, there was some type of freak storm in Atlanta. So we know if you live, you know, those of us that live in northern or colder areas, we don't deal with it. But when you're in the South, if there's any type of you know, snow, what they would consider to be a snowstorm or any type of freak weather event like that, they shut down everything. So they shut down court. Imam Jamil was never notified. And some kind of way, something happened, they reopened the court. And so he misses his court date. So naturally they put out a warrant for his arrest. And so on March 16th, so we're gonna move it up somewhat. On March 16th of 2000, they dispatched two sheriff deputies to issue an arrest warrant to Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Now, something that has to be noted about these two sheriff deputies going to arrest or going to issue this arrest warrant to Imam Jamil Al-Amin is that an arrest warrant was issued around 10 o'clock at night, you know, and I don't know, that just doesn't seem really, you know, for a minor traffic offense to issue an arrest warrant at 10 o'clock at night, it seems very abnormal. You know, I don't know how they function, you know, normally in Atlanta, but if you would imagine in most places, you're not gonna send two of your sheriff deputies out to issue an arrest warrant at 10 o'clock at night for a minor traffic violation. You know, it just doesn't add up. So these deputies came. This is when the incident takes place. A shootout ensues. Both deputies are wounded. Both deputies, one ends up dying. The other one is just wounded. He didn't die. Both deputies claim that they shot the assailant. Both deputies claim that the assailant was about 5'8" and had gray eyes. You know, anyone that's ever seen Imam Jamil in person, the man is a giant. He's like every bit of 6'5", 6'6" feet tall, you know, and he doesn't have gray eyes. So from that point, and also an important point again, when he was captured, he was not wounded. So all of these things, like Imam Dawood said earlier, these things are a matter of record. You can go back and find the fact that, okay, yes, they said that this was the description of the perpetrator. They said that they wounded him, you know, and we all remember at the time, if you weren't in Atlanta, and when the incident happened, automatically you thinking like, okay, well, Imam Jamil has been shot, because this is what they reported. They reported that he had been shot. And when we saw him being arrested, when he was arrested in Whitehall, I believe it was maybe 3 or 4 days later, he wasn't wounded. And also, when they served the search warrant, it was the night before the Eid, you know, and Imam Jamil had already determined that he was going to do the Eid in Whitehall. So all of these things, when you put them together, and even as Imam Dawood said about the FBI and the COINTELPRO, there was one particular FBI agent that insisted that he be on this case. And I'm sure Imam Dawood has more detail about it, but he insisted that he be on this case. And this same FBI agent had a previous record of assassinating someone in Philadelphia and placing a gun on him after he killed them. This is known, Agent Ron Campbell. And he insisted that he be on this case. And when they captured Imam Jamil in Whitehall, Alabama, he went to the scene of the crime by himself, without any local authorities with him or anyone with him. He went to the scene of the crime by himself, and where he was at, even the local authorities said, these weapons have been placed. So from all of that information, what you can gather is that, again, going back to COINTELPRO until today, that there has always been a vendetta, not only against Imam Jamil al-Amin, but anyone that dared to struggle in this country for the freedom of our people, and anyone that stands for righteousness or against an oppressive system. So there's a precedent that's been set, and it was never. And if you think about Imam Jamil and who he is, and all of the other freedom fighters that were at that time, you could pretty much say that he was the only one left that was still alive, or at least still had his spirit intact. And I mean his faculties, because there were certain things that they did to other brothers and sisters that, through, whether they were incarcerated, that literally changed who they were. There's evidence of what they used to give people, certain types of chemical lobotomies and different things of that nature. So you have people that may have done time in prison, and when they come out, they're no longer who they were, or they either in exile, or they just assassinate them like they did Fred Hampton, like the brother mentioned, and as well, like he mentioned about Imam Luqman, rahimahullah. And so this is where we're at. This is the layout, just a general sketch of the case of Imam Jamil and what happened at that time. And Imam Jamil is a state prisoner of Georgia, but he's being housed in the federal prison system. So the taxpayers of Georgia are being charged. They're paying the federal system to house a state prisoner. And this is something, again, that's unprecedented. They've moved him around the country. They've moved him. He's in Arizona currently. So they're keeping him in places to where he doesn't have access to his lawyers. So just in brief, that's just a.
Ibrahim, we've lost your video.
Okay, I can still see you.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay.
We had just lost you there for a second.
Okay.
So alhamdulillah, thank you. You've laid it out for us. Again, there are so many bits and pieces to the story that we just don't have time to tell. But Brother Ibrahim hit on something very important, that Imam Jamil, yes, he's all of 6'6". I'm 6'5", Brother Ibrahim, and Imam Jamil would look down at me, okay? And he was an individual by virtue of his history that people knew. The community knew him, the residents of Atlanta, Georgia knew him. He literally could go anywhere, not only in Georgia, but anywhere in the country, especially in the African-American community, and be recognized. He was loved and he was respected. Keep in mind the fact, as Brother Ibrahim said, this warrant is being served at 10 o'clock at night. Anybody that knows the West End, Atlanta, Georgia, where the mosque is today, where the store is and where it was, Imam Jamil would sit outside in front of that store people knew where they could find Imam Jamil. They knew where the masjid was. So having said that, Imam Dawood, I'm going to ask you to put us now, help the community understand the relationship between Imam Luqman and Imam Jamil El-Amin.
Yeah, so just to, and I don't want to be too long, I'll probably be a little shorter than the time that I was allotted, but the relationship between Imam Luqman and Imam Jamil, I would say I need to go a little step back to talk about a movement called the Dar al-Islam movement. And the Dar al-Islam movement was a movement predominantly of African Americans who were Sunnis that were not affiliated or ever part of the Nation of Islam. And that movement in the late 60s into the 70s ended up splintering. There was a man that came into our community, somewhat of a unknown character by the name or known as Sheikh Sayyid Jilani, came into the community, and there ended up being a split of the Dar al-Islam movement. One group went with Sheikh Jilani, and they called themselves Jamaat al-Fuqara. And then the other group, Imam Jamil ended up leading that other group that was known as El-Ummah. So these were the two groups. Imam Luqman, upon his embracing Islam and being somewhat affiliated with that, he followed Imam Jamil El-Amin. So this is firstly how they have their relationship. They end up becoming very close, like friends. Imam Luqman himself, being from the South, being from originally from Alabama, would also go and pay Imam Jamil visits frequently, knowing his wife, children, very familiar. He would also spend time in Atlanta with Imam Jamil sporadically. So now we look at this and we fast forward that when Imam Jamil was wrongly targeted by the government at different times, and I mentioned these different years, 1993, 1995, then Brother Ibrahim mentioned 1999, in which those bogus charges were put on Imam Jamil, in which, by the way, there was a person who actually confessed of being the shooter in Atlanta, and the judge actually blocked that from going into the record, and also the prosecutors. They actually know of the individual who confessed to doing the shooting and said Imam Jamil didn't do it. But see, this is part of the whole COINTELPRO 2.0 agenda of the FBI and the government that never stopped. But the important point is that Imam Luqman, rahmatullahi alayhi, was going around the country, including here in Michigan and some of our masajid in this area. Probably, and maybe some of you who are aware or old enough may even remember, Imam Jamil was the main person that was going around the country fundraising for Imam Jamil's legal fund, including his appeal. So this is something very important. So he is the right-hand man and the main man of the COINTELPRO target, who's going around, who's making calls and connecting with people around the country about raising funds to get Imam Jamil exonerated. Now, when we fast forward, and I'll go into some of the specifics a little later of the case, that when the criminal indictment came out against Imam Luqman in 2009, in which we believe it's completely bogus, and I'll go into some of the details regarding that whole conspiracy about what happened with the Imam Luqman. But in the criminal affidavit in 2009, Imam Jamil El-Amin's name, Hafidhahullah, was mentioned 3 times in the criminal affidavit of Imam Luqman. So then the question becomes, why is it that Imam Jamil is mentioned 3 times in the criminal affidavit of a case that he had nothing materially, that there was even nothing allegedly linking him materially to the case, and he had been behind bars for about a decade. So it was a way of connecting Imam Luqman to Imam Jamil as a type of propaganda tool by the FBI and the U.S. attorney at the time who filed the charges, who was Terrence Berg at the time, and then who took over the case, by the way, after that, was the former U.S. attorney of this district, Barbara McQuaid, who, by the way, right now is on Joe Biden's transition team, right? Who was all a part of this situation of helping to smear and set up this whole situation relating to Imam Luqman. And I have to say that for a reason, that she is on President-elect Joe Biden's transition team. Who knows, maybe she'll be nominated for Attorney General. We don't know. But this targeting of these leaders, right? The targeting of these leaders such as Imam Jamil and others, it happened under Democratic administrations with Democrat appointees, as well as Republican administrations and Republican appointees. And when this thing happened with Imam Luqman, President Barack Hussein Obama was the president, and you had so-called progressives or so-called liberals who then took over acting as the U.S. attorney in this Eastern District right here in Michigan, right? So this is bipartisan targeting we're talking about here. It's not, so I just want you to be clear about it and don't get twisted to say, oh, the Republicans are just so bad, and then, but the so-called liberals or Democrats are so good. That's not the case at all. And we shouldn't fall into that false framework.
Alhamdulillah, Imam Dawood. Brother Ibrahim, we're going to ask you now to literally give us an update. Where are we with Imam Jamil's case? What's going on? What can the people do, inshallah ta'ala?
Inshallah. Well, as of right now, like I said, Imam Jamil is being housed at USP Tucson, Arizona. And right now we've had a campaign going on for some time, and we've been building up a lot of momentum. We have a petition out in order to get Imam Jamil a new trial. That's what we're obviously trying to get him exonerated first and foremost. But at the very least, we need to get Imam Jamil a new trial. And because now the Fulton County, Georgia, has what they call a Conviction Integrity Unit. The Conviction Integrity Unit will look at any discrepancies in a controversial case such as Imam Jamil al-Amin's, which it fits every criteria that it needs to fit in order for him to get a retrial. And as I mentioned earlier, former Ambassador Andrew Young, and also former mayor of Atlanta, he himself mentioned that Imam Jamil needs, through the Conviction Integrity Unit in Fulton County, Georgia, he needs to get a new trial. So Paul Howard, who was the outgoing DA of Fulton County, was the same DA that during Imam Jamil's conviction was trying to push for the death penalty. The new incoming DA, and she'll be in, the DA of Fulton County, she'll be in January. Her name is Fannie Willis. What we're trying to do is push Fannie Lewis to be on the right side of history. Fannie Lewis has an opportunity, as I said earlier, because of people like Imam Jamil al-Amin. If there was no Imam Jamil al-Amin, there would be no Fannie Willis. So she has an opportunity not only to be on the right side of history, but to exonerate someone who has put her in the position of power that she's in right now. And if we can continue to push As we had a rally on October 4th, which is Imam Jamil, this past October 4th, which is Imam Jamil's birthday. We had a rally in Atlanta. We have people that are on her transition team come and say that they are going to push this issue, that they believe in Imam Jamil's innocence. These are people who in Fulton County, Georgia, have access to the conviction integrity unit. So what people could do, people could write the Fulton County DA, and her name is Fannie Willis. People can go to www. And you have to put in the www in this particular website because it'll take you to a defunct website. www.imamjamilactionnetwork.org. You can find a petition there. Also, the website, Kyrie Alameen, Imam Jamil's son, has a website. It's called whathappened2rap.com. Whathappened2rap.com. You can find the petition there as well. And also, like Imam Dawood mentioned, you can see the confession of Otis Jackson. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look at the evidence on both those websites that I mentioned. Everything is laid out. You can look at the evidence. You can see the confession of the person that committed the crime. And we can continue to build this momentum in order to free Imam Jamil Alameen. And the precedent that we're setting by freeing Imam Jamil Alameen is going to affect other political prisoners as well.
Excellent, alhamdulillah. Imam Dawood, if you could give us an update on the situation with the case relative to Imam Luqman.
So in October of 2009, Imam Luqman was driving a person that we know now to have been a confidential informant of the FBI agent provocateur going by the name of Jamil. We actually have a picture of him. Had Imam Luqman take him to a commercial warehouse in which brothers were doing, had been doing work. The guy was posing himself as being a businessman who actually ran a commercial warehouse moving things. I mean, there were tractor trailer trucks and pallets and everything that was there. What happened that day is that there was a multi-jurisdictional sting operation that was set up that day in which Imam Luqman and 3 other people were there at the warehouse. The FBI flew in a special technical team from Washington, D.C., who 4 special sharpshooters of military background who were brought in to the warehouse. They let off percussion grenades, brought in an attack dog. Outside, there was about almost 90 other agents from different law enforcement agencies, from the Dearborn Police, the Detroit Police, Michigan State Police, the ATF, Border Patrol, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and even one Royal Canadian Mountie. Even they had a Canadian officer there as part of the raid. They let off percussion grenades. Then they released an attack dog on Imam Luqman, who began to attack him and mauled his face. And then the FBI then shot at Imam Luqman, shooting their attack dog and shooting him fatally. They shot him 20 times, including in the genitals and in the back. And then when they saw that that their dog was shot, the FBI had their helicopter on the scene. And instead of taking Imam Luqman and flying him to the hospital, they let him bleed out, and they took the dog and flew the dog, Freddie the dog, to a veterinary hospital in Macomb County in Warren, in which the dog eventually died. Now, during that case, we know that there were 4 informants who infiltrated Mashal Haq in Detroit. just going back. We believe that they targeted Imam Luqman in part because of his relationship to Imam Jamil. We only ever found out who one of those informants were, but there were there were 4 informants. So there's 3 other people there that were in the community then and still may be in the community right now that were working on behalf of the FBI. This took place for several years. The FBI spent millions of dollars in this case, and they were looking for something relating to trying to get terrorism charges on Imam Luqman and the Jama'ah. It's important to know that even in information that ended up becoming public, that the informant by the name of Jibril tried to lure Imam Luqman into something. This was the year when the Super Bowl was at Ford Field, when Ford Field was completed, that he was trying to get the brothers to do an attack on the Super Bowl. And Imam Luqman, rahmatullahi alayhi, was on audio and was recorded as saying, "That's un-Islamic. We can't do that. It is against Islam to do any harm to any civilians, even in a time of war, but we're not at war." So this was like, but they kept on staying there. So what they tried to do is, I call it a constellation prize, where they set up this whole thing with the commercial warehouse and tried to get the brothers indicted or arrested on conspiracy to sell stolen goods. And this conspiracy, and not actually trafficking stolen goods, because none of the goods in the warehouse were stolen. It was all paid for by our tax dollars, millions of dollars spent. Anyway, Imam Luqman was killed. There were 3 other people who were at the scene or who were arrested. There were a couple of other arrests. And then also detained was Imam Luqman's widow, Sister Amina. And she found out Imam Luqman was killed when they went to the house. After they killed him, they went to the house, ICE along with the FBI, and they told her that they killed Imam Luqman, mocking her. Then they took her outside of the house. They didn't allow her to put on proper clothing. She basically had the clothing that she would wear in the bed, and they walked her outside basically without her hijab, without proper clothing on, and walked her to the car while the TV cameras were outside. They claimed that she had an immigration violation and she was put in jail. We got her out. Eventually, she was deported back to Tanzania, and she's never been able to be back in the country since then. She's been gone now for about 10 years. In regard to Imam Luqman's case, we filed a civil lawsuit at CARE, Michigan. Attorney Sharif Akil joined us as co-counsel, and we sued the FBI along with the Department of Justice, claiming that they were involved in a conspiracy to commit fraud and also wrongful death. Long story short, we filed the lawsuit against them and the technical team of the shooters. They would not release the names of the shooters. So then they argued that we didn't have standing in the case because we did not name the actual shooters, in which the shooting team, the FBI would not divulge the names of the shooters because they claimed it was national security risk. We then sued the head of the FBI here and the head of the technical team. And once we filed that case, after the FBI and DOJ kept dragging the case along, they then said that we ran out of the statute of limitations. So we then filed a petition to have the Supreme Court hear our case. in regards to us having proper standing in relationship to the statute of limitations. And the Supreme Court refused to hear our case, going with the ruling of the U.S. Circuit Court in Cincinnati, which is one of the most conservative courts in America. And this was about almost 3 years ago now, maybe closer to 4 years. But our case basically ended at that point when about 3 years ago, when the Supreme Court said that they would not hear our case regarding Imam Luqman. So we never had a chance to argue the case in court. But let me tell you this, that they claimed Imam Luqman had a gun. We had a sworn affidavit of a non-governmental witness, an eye and ear witness, that said Imam Luqman did not have a gun. The so-called gun they claim he had was never found on the scene. The shooting team claimed they picked up the gun and took it back within the DC. Upon the test of the gun, Imam Luqman's fingerprints were not on the gun. None of his DNA was on the gun. And during his autopsy report, and there's something called a paraffin test normally they would do to check and see if there's gunpowder on someone's hands, but there was no paraffin test results saying that Imam Luqman had a gun to supposedly shoot Freddie the dog. If he had fired that gun, he would have had either gunpowder on his fingers and or also his fingerprints on that gun. So we believe the FBI used what's called a throw weapon, which is common. This is something common that police departments do in Black communities all the time, where they will shoot someone and then they have a throw gun, which is a spare gun they keep in the that they picked up from somebody else, a spare gun they keep in the trunk or something, and then they will put it by the person after they shot the person to say, see, this person had a gun. That's what happened with our beloved brother, Imam Luqman. And we, every year, we go to his qabr at Norwood Cemetery. We do it every year to make a dua for him. I normally go there once a week. I go there every week and make a dua for him. This has been the most consequential case I've ever dealt with in my life. And we shed a lot of tears behind this case. And I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept him as shaheed and have him in Jannatul Firdaus A'la with Hamza radiallahu an and Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu an and the other great shuhada from the Sahaba. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to accept him and have him be amongst their company along with our beloved Shaheed Malcolm X rahimahullah ta'ala. Ameen, ameen, ameen.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Dawood. Alhamdulillah, for the brothers and sisters, we've thrown a lot. Alhamdulillah, Brother Ibrahim, Imam Dawood have given you a lot of information this evening to digest. And humbly, we would ask you to do a couple of things just immediately. For those who have questions, you're welcome to type it in or let Brother Salman know. And if you can just give a sign here in the chat and we'll unmute you so you can talk. But please make dua for our Imam Jamil. Alhamdulillah. As Brother Ibrahim said, there's a couple of things that are going on right now in an attempt to deal with his situation. Please make dua for Imam Luqman. And understand as Muslims that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just at the end of the day, irrespective of the information that's been covered up, evidence that's been tampered with, statements that have been taken out of context, lies that have been said and discovered in both situations. We know that at the end of the day, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. I see a statement here. in the chat, Imam Jamil was also the thinker behind the idea of establishing a Muslim community based on Islamic principles. This attracted many Muslim African-American leaders from other parts of the US. Oh, okay. The brother Masood is letting us know that Imam Jamil, which he was at the forefront of literally establishing a Jamaat, a Muslim community. You could go down to the West End, and for those of you that don't know about the West End, when Imam Jamil came out of prison and went to the West End, that area that they established was an absolute mess. They did drugs openly there across the street from the store. And it was a difficult situation. They established Salah, and they eventually cleaned up that area. And he was, and he still is, that effort was and still is an inspiration to many, many people here in this country. And again, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to protect, guide, and help our Imam. Brother Ibrahim, is there anything else that you'd like to add? I don't see any other questions. Or Imam Dawood, please feel free to speak.
Just adding on to what Masood Uncle said, and this is something that maybe a lot of you don't know, but actually the Muslim Alliance of North America, known as MANA, actually this was Imam Jamil's idea. This was his brainchild. He ended up obviously getting arrested, but it was founded in Imam Siraj Wahaj, Hafidhullah, became the Amir of MANA once it was incorporated. But actually, this was initially Imam Jamil's idea and part of his wanting to bring together the Muslim community to address specifically the needs of African American and Latino American Muslims, and even more specifically in urban areas. So I just wanted to give you all some of that background of how visionary Imam Jamil was and is, and the amount of work and sacrifice that that he did on behalf of Muslims in America.
Brother Ibrahim?
Yeah, I think that an important point that ties Imam Luqman rahmatullahi alayh and Imam Jamil together as well is that, and it's in relation to what Imam Dawood just mentioned, you know, the visionary leadership of Imam Jamil al-Amin is the project in Whitehall, Alabama. Whitehall, Alabama was when you look at it, and anyone can go on YouTube now and Google Imam Jamil's speech from Whitehall, when he called us down to Whitehall, a place of struggle, and he compared Whitehall to Medina and being invited in by a non-Muslim municipality in order for the Muslims to develop this area. And also it's the place where Imam Jamil was captured at. And also Imam Luqman was the person that was keeping the Whitehall project and the initiative alive. This was Imam Luqman took that upon himself after Imam Jamil was locked up. And if you look at anything in the history of the struggle and for our people in this country, Whitehall was an act of self-determination. And that very well could have been the one thing, you know, what they say, you know, it's not one straw that broke the camel's back, but it's a million others beneath it. But that was one of the things, like almost like the cherry on top. And you had Imam Jamil, through his visionary leadership, initiate the Whitehall project, and Imam Luqman, rahmatullahi alayhi, continue what Imam Jamil envisioned through his leadership. So I think those things are important to understand, you know, not only in relation to both of these cases, but just in relation as well to the struggle of our people in this country moving forward.
Alhamdulillah. And again, to keep in mind for the listeners, for the people that are listening, oftentimes when we hear something like we're hearing now, and this is really unique between these two stories, separate but linked. People have a tendency to get down and to lose hope. One of the extraordinary things I've seen is that in death, Imam Luqman has become larger than life. His impact, his influence, his presence is extraordinary. And Imam Jamil, they've done everything for literally 50 years of this man's life to silence him, to cancel him out, to neutralize him, to keep him from being able to touch the hearts of people. For people that don't know, he was given the moniker, the nickname Rap, because he could talk. And again, if you have a chance to go back and listen to this man, he was brilliant, just an extraordinary individual in terms of being able to conceptualize a true freedom fighter and to share with the people and help the people understand exactly what needed to be done. And as a result of both lives, what has happened is, in attempting to silence those two individuals, it literally has produced seeds, two of which we've listened to tonight. Young people who are committed, who are staying the course, who understand, and who are communicating and working with other people to change the flow of events and to change the scenario of oppressed people here in the United States. And for those people who don't feel a link to Imam Jamil or Imam Luqman as a result of ethnic background or color, please understand that oppression really doesn't change. Oppression is oppression. And we had a saying, and I still hear the saying, not as often. Literally, if they come for me today, they'll come for you tomorrow. And this is a reality. So brothers and sisters, I'm asking the listening audience to think about what's been shared with you this evening, to make some effort to understand what has taken place in the lives of these two brothers, and also to think about that in the context of what's going on today, as Imam Dawood drew a couple of interesting corollaries between what has taken place and what's going on right now. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. Having said that, I'll ask both of you one last statement before we close. I don't see any questions, and inshallah ta'ala, we'll wrap it up. Imam Dawood, and then Brother Ibrahim, our guest.
We ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to preserve Imam Jamil. We ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to grant him freedom from his unjust incarceration. We ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to give his divine support to all of those who are working on behalf of Imam Jamil Al-Amin in this case. We ask Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to accept Imam Luqman amongst the Shuhada. We ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to assist and help his widow who was deported out of the country. We ask Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to bless and keep Imam Luqman's family and his prodigy to come for the next 7 generations. We ask Almighty Allah to keep them on La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And we ask Almighty Allah to make from the progeny of Imam Luqman, to make among them imams, leaders, both men and women that can lead our community and be a source of dawah. We ask Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make us be people of moral courage and not make us be people who are like sheep, who are just sheepish people and scared and just follow trends. We ask Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to make us be anti-racist and to take racism out of our hearts. Ya Allah, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya the Jalali Ikram, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam.
Brother Ibrahim? one last closing remark, statement, anything you'd like?
Alhamdulillah, I have no, there's nothing I can say after that. Alhamdulillah, I just want to thank you all for allowing us to represent, IJAN here. And, we have, I guess there's one brief thing I'd like to say. We ask that you keep our organization in your dua as well. And we just recently we lost our leader, our emir of the organization. He just died last week. We've lost other people within our brother Yahya Abdul Sabor is his name. We've lost Imam Khalil Abdul Rahman last year, and we lost Sister Aliyah Walker before him. So all of these people, we have people that are involved in this struggle that this is the last thing that they were doing. This is the last, effort that they were putting forth for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us all and forgive us of our shortcomings.
Ameen. We thank the MCWS community. This Friday night program, Angel Circle, is something that continues to happen every Friday evening. Next week, the title of the program will be Work of Ihsan, a panel discussion on special needs and disability. We ask everyone tonight to dial in next week at 8:30. Having said that, we thank both of our guests, Brother Ibrahim out of Cleveland, Imam Dawood from here in Detroit. Thank you, brothers and sisters who dialed in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to guide and protect you and your families. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.